Hey everyone, welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome for the first time. In today's video, we're going to crush one of history's most persistent myths, that being a knight in the Dark Ages was some kind of noble, glamorous dream. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Forget the polished armor and heroic duels. The reality? It was a brutal, filthy, miserable slog through mud, disease, and endless discomfort. Today, we're taking off the Hollywood shine and diving into the raw, unfiltered truth of what being a medieval knight really meant. And let's be honest, today we complain if the coffee's too bitter, or if the Wi-Fi drops for 3 minutes. Meanwhile, knights were praying not to die from a splinter or collapse from heat stroke inside 60 pounds of rusting regret. You think your job is exhausting? Try sword fighting for someone else's land 6 days a week with nothing but gruel in your stomach and fleas in your underpants. So, before we begin, and before you get too comfortable, I'm just a nerd who likes history, so it will mean a lot if you like, and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments, what city and country are you watching from? And what time is it right now where you are? It's always amazing to see people from all over the world tuning in, and I love reading where you're all watching from. Now, strap in and get ready to have your medieval dreams shattered one rusty fact at a time. This is why you'd regret being a knight in the Dark Ages. You've been lied to. Not a little fib, an epic, glittering lie polished over centuries of storybooks, video games, and Hollywood dramas. The image of the noble knight, shining in spotless armor, galloping across emerald fields toward honor and destiny. Yeah, that's fiction. A beautiful illusion crafted by people who never had to sleep on a lice-infested straw pallet or scrub dried blood off their own chainmail with sand and regret. In reality, being a knight in the Dark Ages wasn't about glory. It was about survival. Barely. Let's set the record straight. You weren't a majestic hero. You were a walking target, a glorified thug for hire with bad knees and a sword that weighed more than a toddler on a sugar high. Knights weren't all noble sons. Plenty were landless mercenaries, second sons with no inheritance, or minor nobles trying desperately not to starve between wars. You weren't sipping wine in candlelit halls. You were crawling through trenches, sweating under 60 pounds of rust-prone armor, and praying the other guy had worse aim than you. And that armor, it didn't shine, it reeked. If you were lucky, it was oiled and functional. If not, it was a rusting death trap. A walking oven in summer, a freezing tomb in winter. Taking it off required help, and putting it on meant mentally preparing for a day of zero flexibility, chafed thighs, and helmet sweat pooling in places you didn't know could sweat. Your daily life wasn't filled with romantic duels or serenading maidens from horseback. Most days it was boredom, bruises, and blisters. You trained until your arms went numb. You patrolled muddy roads hoping not to get ambushed. You tried not to die from a tooth infection or a saddle sore that turned septic. As for chivalry, that shining code of honor you've heard so much about, it was more PR than principle. Knights swore oaths, sure, but those oaths bent and broke depending on who paid the most or which lord looked scarier. Raiding villages, slaughtering peasants, burning crops, those were Tuesday morning activities. Glory didn't mean justice. It meant loot, leverage, and lasting long enough to get another assignment. Even the idea of being respected is laughable. Commoners didn't cheer for you. They feared you, or hated you, or both. Because when knights rode into town, it often meant taxes, conscription, or someone's barn catching fire by accident. The worst part? You bought into it. You trained since you were a child, thinking you were climbing toward greatness. But now you're here. Your armor stinks. Your joints ache. Your sword is chipped. Your lord doesn't remember your name. And your legacy? It'll probably be wiped out by the next war, or the next plague, or the next unlucky gamble you call a battle. This is the truth no bard sings and no movie shows. Not all knights slayed dragons. Most just fought mud, misery, and each other. So if you ever fantasize about living in the age of chivalry, don't. You'd regret it by sunrise. The sun hasn't even risen, but your day has already begun, and it starts in misery. You don't wake up in a four-poster bed surrounded by tapestries and silk sheets. You wake up on a straw mattress that smells like a stable, stuffed with hay, fleas, and the occasional unwelcome rodent. The ceiling above you is a rough timber beam coated in soot from last night's fire, and somewhere nearby a hound is coughing. Yes, coughing, because even your dog is sick of this life. You stretch, or try to. Your shoulders scream. Your back cracks like firewood. Your left knee refuses to participate. Sleeping in armor is a myth, but sleeping in the same filthy woolen tunic for weeks, that's real. The linen undergarment clinging to your body hasn't been washed in days, maybe weeks. You'd wash it, sure, if you had time, energy, or access to clean water that didn't have things living in it. The air is freezing, of course. The fire's gone out, and there's a fine layer of frost on your boots. Not outside, inside. You roll over and hit something squishy. It's your squire, snoring on a blanket near the hearth, because he's too poor to sleep anywhere else and too terrified to complain about it. You finally sit up, joints stiff, head pounding from last night's ale, or maybe from the mold growing on the wall. You pull on your breeches and stomp your feet into half-dried leather boots, still damp from yesterday's ride through the marsh. They squish, they smell, and they welcome your feet with the embrace of a medieval fungal infection. Breakfast? Not yet. First comes prayer, then chores, then yelling, then maybe breakfast, if the cook hasn't burned it again or traded it for beer. You stagger outside into a courtyard slick with mud and manure. The cold punches you in the face like a mailed fist. You inhale deeply. The scent is unforgettable. Old sweat, wood smoke, horse dung, and failure. Your horse, tied nearby, watches you with eyes full of judgment. You're not a noble warrior to him. You're the guy who forgot to brush him yesterday and now expects loyalty in return. He snorts and turns his rear end toward you. A medieval good morning. You head toward the training field. You'll spend hours there, sword drills, mounted practice, sparring with men who barely know how to hold a blade. Your muscles already ache from yesterday, and your trainer is a former mercenary with no indoor voice and no mercy. This is the life. Cold, cramped, cranky. No privacy, no comfort, and no sense of personal space. You're surrounded by other men, all of whom smell like horses, mold, and regret. And this is just the start of your day. You dreamed of becoming a knight. This was the dream. Turns out, it's less of a calling and more of a chronic condition. Let's talk about where you live. You're a knight, after all, so you must have a castle, right? Stone towers, roaring fireplaces, tapestries fluttering in the candlelight, noble banquets in grand halls. Think again. That castle you're imagining. That's the Instagram filter version of reality. Your home is a stone box, cold in winter, damp in summer, and always echoing like a crypt. There's no insulation, just raw stone walls that sweat moisture and grow moss like it's wallpaper. Wind whistles through the cracks, rats scurry through the halls, and the only thing that roars is your stomach echoing in the hollow silence of your so-called great hall. Privacy. Non-existent. You sleep near servants, or your squire, or, if you're really unlucky, your lord's extended family. You can hear everything, snoring, coughing, chewing, whispering. Every night is a symphony of medieval misery, with you, front row, no earplugs. The floors? Hard-packed dirt or rough-hewn planks. The ceiling? A nest for spiders and dust. Windows? Slits in the wall that let in just enough air to freeze your fingers but not enough light to see where the chamber pot is. And yes, there is a chamber pot, if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's the bucket in the corner, shared, full, and completely lacking dignity. Roaring fireplaces? Sure, there's a hearth. But the smoke doesn't go up and out like in the stories. It lingers, chokes, stings your eyes until you feel like you're crying over your own bad life choices. You don't smell like victory. You smell like soot and disappointment. What about food? The kitchens are smoky, greasy, and full of yelling. Everything tastes burnt or bland. Sometimes both. You sit at a rough wooden table with splinters and old food stains, watching your meal get served on a plate that hasn't seen hot water since last harvest. Your drink? Ale again, because the water might kill you faster than your enemies. You try to find a moment to yourself, but someone's always needing something. Your squire wants orders. The cook wants wood. The stable hand says your horse kicked someone again. You want to scream, but there's no echo chamber quite like a stone wall. It just throws your frustration right back at you. Outside, the castle walls are high and intimidating. But inside, the air is stale, and morale is lower than a peasant's wages. You can't escape the cold, you can't escape the noise, you can't even escape the lice. This isn't a fortress of solitude, it's a prison with slightly nicer views. If you thought castles were majestic, think again. You're not in a fairy tale, you're in a rock cage full of grumbling people in medieval mildew. Welcome home. Let's be honest, your nose gave up hope weeks ago. Being a knight in the Dark Ages wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a full-on olfactory assault. Hygiene, as we understand it today, simply did not exist, and if it did, it was treated like heresy or witchcraft. Cleanliness might be next to godliness now, but back then, it was next to impossible. Start with your body. You bathe occasionally, maybe once a month. Maybe, assuming there's time, a clean water source and no war happening. Even then, you're not soaking in rose petals. You're scrubbing yourself with cold water hauled from a stream that probably has a dead squirrel floating somewhere upstream. Soap? That's a luxury. Most of the time it's ash, sand, or just vigorous denial. Your hair is greasy, your scalp is itchy, and your skin, a road map of bug bites, rashes, and grime. Fleas are your constant companions. Lice? Practically part of your armor set. Every joint in your body itches, and scratching only makes it worse. And no, you can't just throw on fresh clothes. You only own one set. Maybe two if you're lucky, or if your squire hasn't ruined the other in the wash, meaning dunking it in a river and stomping it with bare feet. Speaking of clothes, let's talk about the smell. Your undergarments are soaked in weeks of sweat, mud, and fear. Your tunic is stiff from dried grime. Your socks are more whole than fabric. Your cloak smells like wet dog, and that's on a good day. You don't so much wear clothes as inhabit them like a sad, itchy ghost. What about your mouth? Medieval dental care was a tragic joke. No toothbrush, no toothpaste, no floss. If you're lucky, you might chew a minty twig now and then. But most of the time, you're just hoping the rot spreads slowly. Your breath smells like spoiled cheese mixed with regret. Your teeth ache constantly. Some are already gone. The rest are plotting their exit. Now imagine putting on a helmet, not a shiny, clean one. One that's been on your sweaty, bug-bitten head for hours every day. The inside reeks of oil, mold, and the tears of 1,000 regrettable battles. And it rubs hard. Your forehead is red, your scalp is blistered, and every time you take it off, it pulls out more hair than it leaves behind. And yet, somehow, all of this is normal. No one comments, no one judges, because everyone else is just as filthy. When you ride into battle, the enemy can smell you coming before they see your banner. You don't sneak up on anyone. You arrive like a storm of odor and armor. Hygiene isn't just lacking. It's a distant rumor, whispered among monks and forgotten by everyone else. You are a walking ecosystem, carrying with you the scent of misery and the bacteria of the entire Middle Ages. You thought being a knight meant dignity, but dignity doesn't survive 3 weeks without a bath. You'd think that suiting up for battle would feel heroic, like gearing up in slow motion while drums play in the background and destiny waits just outside the door. But in reality, getting dressed as a knight in the Dark Ages is an ordeal, not a ritual, not a rite of passage, a literal physical punishment. Let's start with the basics. First layer, a linen undertunic. It's supposed to protect your skin from the chainmail. Instead, it soaks up your sweat and sticks to your body like a damp rag that's been left under a rotten cabbage. It's itchy, it's stained. It smells like mildew with a hint of despair. Underwear? Optional, and often regretted if skipped. Next comes the padded gamson, a quilted jacket stuffed with wool or straw, sometimes both, and stitched together with the enthusiasm of someone who's never heard of comfort. It's heavy, it's hot. It clings to your arms like a drunk bear hug and makes you sweat before you even touch your armor. You haven't even left the room yet, and you're already damp, angry, and reconsidering all your life choices. Then comes the chainmail. And here's where the real fun begins. Chainmail isn't sleek and flexible like the movies make it look. It's an iron shirt that weighs anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds and moves with the grace of a sack of potatoes. It takes 2 people, minimum, to haul it over your shoulders. Your squire groans. You groan louder. It lands on you like regret. Every step after that sounds like keys jangling in a blender. Don't forget the chausses, chainmail leggings. Getting into these is like trying to slide into a wet, metallic boa constrictor. You hop, you swear, you fall. Your squire tries not to laugh, he fails. You briefly consider punching him, but your arms are now encased in vambraces, and you can't bend your elbows without divine assistance. Next comes the plate, if you're lucky enough to afford it. Breastplate, greaves, pauldrons, gauntlets. You're transforming into a human tin can. A very slow, very flammable tin can. The armor's straps are leather and rusted. The buckles are impossible to reach alone. And every single piece pinches, crushes, or restricts something vital. Once fully armored, you can barely move. You can't run. You can't sit. You can't scratch anything. You can't pee without a 10-minute removal process and the silent weeping of your squire. And heaven help you if you drop something, because bending over is officially off the table. You're a knight now, yes, but you're also a prisoner inside your own war suit. And the best part? This whole torturous process isn't reserved for battle days. You're expected to do drills, parades, inspections, and possibly jousting, while wrapped in the medieval equivalent of an iron straitjacket. So, no, getting dressed isn't empowering, it's exhausting. Every morning you wrap yourself in layers of wool, leather, metal, and delusion. You're not just suiting up, you're surrendering to suffering. And you haven't even left for the battlefield yet. So, you finally made it into your armor. Congratulations. You now officially weigh as much as a medium-sized anvil and move with the grace of a collapsing shed. You look impressive, sure. But that shiny exterior, it's a lie. A cruel, metallic lie forged in fire and regret. Armor in the Dark Ages was not sleek, not comfortable, and definitely not practical. Whether you wore mail, partial plate, or, If you were absurdly wealthy, full plate, the experience was less battle-ready and more walking tomb. It didn't just slow you down, it owned you. You didn't walk in armor. You lumbered, you clanked, you left a trail of sweat and curses in your wake. Let's start with the weight. A full suit could weigh anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds. That's fine when you're standing still. Not so fine when you're marching 5 miles uphill in summer heat, dodging arrows, or wrestling another tin can-shaped lunatic in the mud. And yes, the armor distributes weight across your body, right up until you fall over. Then you're just a turtle, flailing in the dirt, praying your squire heard your last scream. And the heat. Oh, the heat. Inside your helmet, it's a sauna with no windows. Your sweat has nowhere to go. It pools, it stews. It turns your padded layers into something between a boil-in-bag dinner and a medieval marination experiment. If the sun's out, you're baking like bread in an iron oven. If it's raining, congratulations. You're soaked inside and out, because your armor is now a rusting sponge. Vision, severely limited. Your helmet has a slit, that's it. You see the world in a thin rectangle. Peripheral vision? Gone. You can't see the sword coming from your left until it's introduced itself to your ribs. Hearing? Muffled? Breathing? Labored? And if someone knocks your helmet sideways, good luck finding your enemy. Or your footing. And then there's movement. Armor restricts your range so badly that things like turning quickly, bending at the waist, or lifting your sword above your shoulder become full-body events. You don't fight with agility, you fight with momentum. And when that momentum fails, you're just a slow, clanging target. Even worse, the constant upkeep. Your armor needs oiling. Daily, every strap needs checking. Every buckle needs tightening. One loose rivet, and the whole suit starts to sag like wet bread. And God help you if you take a hit. Dented plate doesn't just look bad. It pinches, it cuts. It can trap you inside like a medieval bear trap. But perhaps the worst part isn't the weight, or the heat, or the claustrophobia. It's the illusion. The illusion that you're invincible. That this armor makes you more than human. Until an arrow finds a gap, or a mace crushes your breastplate, or a dagger slips between the joints. Then the illusion breaks. And so do you. So, yeah, armor looks cool, until you're inside it. Then it's just your own personal metal prison. Welcome to knighthood. You'd think, once you've put on your armor, strapped your sword to your belt, and mounted your horse, the hard part is over. You're ready for battle, right? Wrong. Because being a knight isn't just about fighting. It's about maintaining the mountain of metal, leather, and muscle that your entire existence depends on. And that mountain, it constantly breaks. Every piece of equipment you own is either rusting, cracking, unraveling, or already broken. Armor doesn't take care of itself. It's not enchanted, it's not indestructible. It's iron and steel and leather, and it hates moisture, heat, cold, time, and especially you. Let's start with your sword, the centerpiece of every knight's ego. It chips, it dulls, it bends. If you don't sharpen it after every use, and sometimes before, it becomes about as effective as swinging a blunt stick. And sharpening isn't a 5-minute chore. It's a repetitive, arm-numbing grind on a whetstone while your squire stands nearby, pretending not to yawn. Then there's your chainmail. It's made of thousands of tiny interlocking rings. Lose just one, and the whole thing starts to unravel like a cursed sweater. Rust sets in if you so much as look at water. You have to oil it constantly, scrub it with sand, and hang it dry near a fire, but not too near, or it warps. And if your squire forgets even once, you'll know immediately, because putting on rusted chainmail is like rolling around in barbed wire and bad decisions. Leather, even worse. Straps dry out, crack, or rot. Your saddle needs constant greasing, your scabbard warps if left in the sun, your gloves tear, your boots leak, and your belt. That's a ticking time bomb of wear and sweat that might snap the moment you draw your sword in front of the enemy. Nothing says intimidating warrior like fumbling with your pants mid-battle. Helmets dent, shields splinter, lance tips shatter. Every ride, every fight, every training session means something breaks, and something must be repaired. You spend almost as much time in the blacksmith's forge as you do in the field. The blacksmith becomes your therapist. You go to him not just to fix your gear, but to complain, to beg, to weep into your gauntlets while he hammers out yet another dent from your helmet. And you can't skip maintenance. Ever. Neglect your sword, and it fails in battle. Neglect your saddle, and your horse throws you into a ditch. Neglect your armor, and suddenly you're spending the night sawing off a rusted greave because it fused to your leg. Your gear owns you. It demands constant attention, constant care, and a level of patience that medieval life never taught you. You thought being a knight meant riding into glory. Turns out it means oiling mail at midnight with bloody hands, while your squire searches for the missing buckle that fell off during dinner. Being battle-ready isn't about courage. It's about upkeep. And the work never ends. Every era has its fashion statements. The Dark Ages had one too, just none of them were comfortable, breathable, or clean. And if you're a knight, your wardrobe wasn't designed with comfort in mind. It was designed to communicate status, survive wear, and possibly survive warfare. Fashionable? Only if you define fashion as wearing 5 layers of hot, scratchy, smelly fabric that chafes your dignity down to the bone. Your daily outfit starts with a linen undershirt. Sounds nice? It's not. It's rough, coarsely woven, and clings to your sweat like it has a personal grudge. It's the only thing separating your skin from your outer layers of misery. And after a few hours in the heat, you're wishing it wasn't. Then comes your tunic. Wool, of course. Not the soft kind, but the stiff, itchy medieval variety that feels like you're wearing the inside of a haystack. It's dyed, maybe, but only in the colors your rank can afford. Rich blue or red, that's noble territory. You're in brown or green, or something that once was white but now looks like it's seen things. And don't forget the hose. That's right. Tight-fitting wool leggings that itch your legs raw and make every trip to the latrine a tragic event. They sag, they bag, they slide down at the worst moments. Nothing screams confidence like having to hitch up your medieval tights mid-duel. Your belt isn't just for looks. It holds your scabbard, your pouch, maybe a dagger. It also cuts into your stomach like a judgmental leather snake if you dare to eat more than 2 bites of barley stew. And when it rains, which it does often, everything you're wearing soaks up the water like a sponge, clings to your skin, and triples in weight. Every step becomes a squish. Every breath damp. Cloak, sure, if you have one. It's not a dashing cape flowing in the breeze. It's a rough blanket with a clasp that never sits right and always finds a way to choke you mid-gallop. You wear it because the wind cuts through every other layer you've got like a knife through cheese. It doesn't keep you warm, it keeps you slightly less cold. And this is just for everyday wear. Battle attire is worse. Chainmail on top of wool. Wool on top of sweat. Sweat on top of hope. By midday, you're marinating in a personal stew of bacteria and despair. Your armpits become sentient. Your socks could stand on their own. You itch in places you can't reach and smell like someone buried you alive and then dug you up just to laugh. There is no comfort, no cooling fabric, no breathable weave, just scratch, squeeze, sweat, and repeat. Medieval fashion isn't a look, it's a sentence. You don't wear clothes, they wear you down. So, the next time you dream of being a knight, ask yourself, how long could you survive dressed like suffering? The answer is probably not long. You wake up aching, itching, and already regretting your existence. Naturally, you expect something, anything, that might lift your spirits. Maybe a hearty meal, a hot cup of something, some toast. Forget it. You're a knight in the Dark Ages. That means your breakfast is less fuel for the day and more a slow form of punishment. There's no bacon, no eggs, no coffee, certainly no croissants, fruit bowls, or little jars of imported jam. You sit near the fire, or what's left of it, holding a cracked wooden bowl filled with a substance that can only be described as grayish. This is pottage, your faithful companion. It's what you ate yesterday and the day before, and possibly last month. Pottage isn't a dish, it's a strategy, a never-ending stew of water, grains, and whatever scraps didn't rot overnight. Sometimes it's barley, sometimes it's beans, sometimes it's turnips that taste like betrayal. Meat? Only if someone made a mistake at the butcher. Flavor? If you're lucky, there's a wilted onion swimming at the bottom like a forgotten corpse. On the side, bread. But not the soft, warm kind you tear into with delight. This is coarse, dense, and possibly older than your horse. It's more weapon than food. You don't slice it. You break it with effort and maybe a little prayer. It's made from rye or barley flour, sometimes mixed with sawdust, ground peas, or whatever filler makes it chewable. By chewable, we mean able to crack a molar if you're not careful. What do you wash this down with? Surely water? Absolutely not. Water in the Dark Ages is a gamble. Your local stream might be fresh, or it might contain last night's sewage and a decomposing rat. You drink ale, weak, warm, and flat, but at least it's been boiled. Children drink it too. Not for fun, for survival. You sip your beer, gnaw your bread, and try not to gag on the porridge's texture, which falls somewhere between wet plaster and disappointment. This meal doesn't nourish you, it mocks you. It dares you to keep going. And you will, because there's nothing else. Spices, too expensive. Butter, rare, cheese, maybe a crumb if the rats didn't get to it first. Fruit, only if it's in season and not already fermented into something barely drinkable. And if you've got an iron stomach, you might add a strip of dried meat, tough, salty, and a choking hazard. Perfect. This is your breakfast. No silverware, no napkins, no civility, just your hands, your hunger, and the quiet understanding that it's only going to get worse. You eat fast because time is short, and your stomach is angry. But you don't feel full. You feel warned. This is a medieval morning. You don't eat to thrive, you eat to endure. And if you're still hungry, don't worry. Lunch will be more of the same. If it happens at all. Nature calls. And unfortunately, in the Dark Ages, it calls loud and often, especially after a questionable breakfast of turnip stew and last week's ale. But as a knight, answering that call is a logistical nightmare. You're not just dealing with primitive plumbing. You're dealing with primitive everything. Let's start with your armor. You're wrapped in layers. Linen, padding, chainmail, maybe even plate. Removing it is not a quick task. It's a two-person job on a good day and on a bad one. You're praying that whatever's happening can hold until sunset. There are no zippers, no buttons, no discreet flaps, just straps, buckles, and an overwhelming sense of urgency. But say you manage to get partially undressed. Where do you go? There's no bathroom, no chamber with a door, a lock, and a little candle to make it smell nice. If you're lucky, there's a wooden seat over a hole in the ground. If you're really lucky, it's behind a wall. Most of the time, it's not. Many knights simply used buckets. Buckets in the corner of a drafty hall, or behind the stables, or, if you're out on campaign, in the woods, unless you're in armor, in which case, squatting is both humiliating and dangerous. One wrong move, one slip in the mud, and you're face down in your own disaster. And remember, you're not alone. Castles are packed, barracks are worse. Privacy, a luxury reserved for the dead. You might have a curtain, you might not. You might have to go in front of your squire, who's already seen more than he ever asked for. Now, let's talk toilet paper. It doesn't exist. Leaves, rags, bits of straw, whatever's handy and won't give you an infection. Some use moss. Others? Their hands. Hygiene is a suggestion at best. You wipe, hope for the best, and move on. And you don't shake hands later. Ever. If you're lucky enough to live in a castle with a garderobe, a stone chute built into the outer wall, it's slightly better. Slightly. You sit, do your business, and it drops down into the moat. Which is great until you remember the moat is now full of human waste. And also, the enemy knows this, which means someone might actually climb up the chute during a siege. Yes. That happened, a literal backdoor invasion. On the road? Forget it, you find a bush. If there's a bush, if there's not, well, hope you brought a sense of humor and a prayer. You're crouched in the rain, holding your chainmail shirt above your thighs, and trying not to think about dignity because that ship sailed at breakfast. Toileting in the Dark Ages isn't a break in the day, it's a risk. It's exposure, vulnerability, and shame, all rolled into one very smelly, very inconvenient moment. Knights didn't fear dragons. They feared slipping in the dark and becoming a cautionary tale. So the next time you see a knight on screen galloping into battle, looking noble and composed, remember, 10 minutes ago, he may have been trying to undo a rusted belt buckle with shaking hands, praying not to be watched. So, you've managed to wrestle your way into your armor, choke down your porridge, and survive a medieval bathroom break without losing your dignity, what little of it remains. Now, it's time to mount your noble steed, your glorious warhorse, your trusty companion in battle. Easy, right? Wrong. Your horse is massive, not just big, monumental. Warhorses in the Dark Ages weren't delicate ponies. These beasts were muscular, heavy, temperamental tanks bred for power, not comfort. They stood tall, thick-necked, broad-backed, and mean. Climbing onto one of them is not an elegant leap into the saddle. It's a full-body negotiation. First, you need a boost. Remember, you're wearing anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds of armor. You can't just vault up like a movie hero. No, you have to step on a stool or a stone or, if nothing else, your poor squire, who's crouched and bracing for impact as you haul yourself up 1 foot at a time. Your boot gets caught. Your scabbard swings into your leg. You grunt. The horse shifts. You curse. It's a miracle if you don't fall flat on your back with your sword stuck under your ribs. And once you're up there, you're not exactly majestic. You're swaying. The saddle creaks. Your thighs burn. And your back immediately regrets everything. The armor presses into your hips. Your helmet limits your vision. You can barely move, let alone ride with flair. You're less knight in shining armor, and more walking tin barrel glued to a horse. Your steed senses your discomfort. Oh yes, he knows. And he's not impressed. He's a war-trained animal, but that doesn't mean he likes you. In fact, he's probably smarter than you. And moodier. He can feel your hesitation through the reins. He knows when you haven't fed him properly, when you're gripping the saddle too tight, when your nerves are shot. And just when you think you've gotten control, he jerks his head, shifts his weight, or, God forbid, decides to sit. Then you've got spurs to deal with, those shiny wheels on your boots. They dig into your horse's sides to tell him what to do. But if you're not careful, they just confuse him, or anger him, or remind him that you're not his favorite human today. And then he bucks. And your squire sighs because this is the third time this week. If you're riding into town, you're not gliding like a statue of honor. You're clomping, rocking back and forth, sweat pouring down your back, praying the leather doesn't snap, and your helmet doesn't slide down over your eyes again. And if you're riding into battle, that's worse. Now you have to control this half-ton missile while also avoiding arrows, mud, fire, and other knights who are trying to kill you. One wrong shift in the saddle, and you're on the ground, armor first, gasping for breath and hoping no one notices how badly you landed. So, yeah, war horses are majestic, until you have to mount one, ride one, or survive one. Then it's just another piece of medieval suffering between you and the grave. Here's the cruel irony of being a knight. Your horse is often cleaner, healthier, and better fed than you are. While your hair is matted and your clothes smell like an abandoned smokehouse, your war horse is brushed, scrubbed, oiled, and admired like a prize at a royal fair. Because in the hierarchy of medieval care, your steed ranks higher than your dignity. Let's start with the basics. Your horse is your status symbol, your transportation, and your battle partner. Lose the horse, and you're just a heavily armored man crawling across a battlefield. So naturally, your horse gets pampered. Not out of love, out of necessity. A sick or injured horse can't charge. A dirty horse can't wear armor. A neglected horse might throw you at the worst possible moment. Every morning, while you're wiping last night's crust from your eyes and scratching the lice in your armpit, your squire is already hard at work brushing down your steed. Long strokes to remove dust, dirt, and dried sweat. Currying combs scrape away the filth. Hooves are picked clean. The mane is combed, the tail is untangled, and the saddle is inspected, polished, and adjusted with more care than your own bandages. And you're still wearing the same tunic from yesterday and the day before. You haven't washed your face in 3 days. Your teeth are rotting in protest. Your hair is a tangled mess of helmet sweat and unwashed shame. You smell like wet wool and last week's pottage, but no one notices, because your horse smells like lavender oil and freshly churned hay. Yes, lavender oil. Nobles often perfumed their horses. They fed them better grain. They were stabled in clean, dry shelters. Meanwhile, you sleep next to a cold fire in a drafty stone corner and hope the fleas go easy on you tonight. Your squire knows the horse's moods, its appetite, its weak ankle. He knows exactly how to soothe it with a brush, a whisper, or a sugar cube. You get bark tea for your toothache and a slap on the back from your captain telling you to toughen up. If your horse gets a wound, it gets cleaned, stitched, and wrapped. If you get a wound, someone might bleed you or slap some moldy herbs on it and say a prayer. Veterinary care in the Dark Ages? Surprisingly attentive. Medical care for humans? Barely distinguishable from torture. It gets worse. Sometimes nobles name their horses after gods, kings, or virtues, valor, thunder, justice. You barely get called by your actual name unless you're dying, late, or both. In many ways, your horse has a better life than you do. It eats more, sleeps better, smells nicer, and receives more affection. So, as you stand in the cold, scratching your unwashed scalp and watching your squire braid your horse's mane with ceremonial ribbon, you come to a painful realization. You are not the noble knight. You are the side character in your horse's story. You thought becoming a knight was all about honor, tournaments, and heroic poses on windswept hills. But first, you have to train. And training in the Dark Ages is not a dramatic montage with triumphant music. It's a slow-motion endurance test designed to break your body and destroy your spirit. Your day starts before the sun even rises. You're pulled out of your straw bed with a stiff back, sore arms, and probably a new rash forming somewhere unmentionable. You eat a chunk of bread that tastes like regret, gulp down some lukewarm beer because the water might kill you, and then it's time to get better at not dying. The training ground isn't a pristine field, it's mud. Always mud. Or dust when it's not mud. It's full of rocks, manure, and occasionally a dead chicken no one cleaned up. And this is where you'll spend hours, every single day. Sword practice is a nightmare. Your weapon is heavy, not elegantly balanced, not lovingly crafted by an elven blacksmith. Just a long, sharp club that you swing over and over until your arms feel like they're trying to detach themselves in protest. Your opponent is a bored sergeant or another sweaty, miserable knight in training who also hasn't bathed this month. You slam swords, stumble, sweat, curse, and occasionally get hit in the face. There's no padding, no mercy, and no stopping. Then there's shield drills. Sounds simple, until you have to hold that giant wooden slab in front of you while people hit it with clubs, again and again. Your arms go numb, your shoulder seizes, and the guy training you just yells, "Hold!" as if screaming louder will fix the fact that your bones are vibrating. Spear throwing? That's fun until the splinters jam into your palm. Archery? Hope your fingers don't blister. Wrestling in full armor? Imagine 2 trash cans rolling around in wet grass trying to strangle each other. And you're expected to do all this in the blazing heat, the pouring rain, or the biting cold. Seasons don't matter. You train. And if you're thinking, well, at least it'll make me strong, sure, it'll also make you hurt. Your knees ache from squatting, your back aches from lifting, your neck aches from helmet strain, and your hands are blistered, bruised, and permanently dirty. You haven't seen clean fingernails in a year. Oh, and don't forget horse training. You'll ride until your thighs scream, then ride some more. You'll learn to swing a sword from the saddle. You'll fall off. A lot. And every time you land on something sharp. Usually your own pride. There's no cheering crowd, no celebratory banquet, just mud, bruises, and the endless grind of surviving another day without collapsing. You're not training to be a hero. You're training to be barely adequate in a world that wants to kill you every 5 minutes. So if you dream of knighthood, remember, it's not just about glory, it's about exhaustion, the kind that lives in your bones and never leaves. Every knight needs a squire. It's practically tradition. A young, wide-eyed assistant who follows you around, polishes your gear, feeds your horse, and probably knows more about your hygiene habits than your own mother. But if you think being a knight is rough, spare a thought for the poor squire. Because if knighthood is medieval misery with armor, squiring is the unpaid internship from hell. Your squire is up before you. Always. He's hauling water, chopping wood, cleaning your gear, and trying to figure out how to make your breakfast edible, all before you even sit up in your lice-ridden bed. He doesn't complain because he's not allowed to. That's the first lesson in being a squire. Obedience, even when you're exhausted, freezing and sore from carrying your master's boots up and down 3 flights of stone stairs. His job description? Everything. He's your valet, your groom, your butler, your servant, your therapist, and sometimes your human shield. He laces your boots, oils your sword, holds your helmet, and occasionally helps you out of your chainmail when nature calls too quickly. He has no schedule, no breaks, no praise, only tasks. And those tasks aren't glamorous. He scrubs your armor with sand and vinegar until his hands bleed. He shovels your horse's manure before brushing its tail. He carries your weapons, which weigh more than he does, and if he drops them, you yell, because you're tired and angry and that sword cost more than his family's farm. And when battle comes, he doesn't get to hide. He follows you onto the field, carrying backup weapons, spare shields, and the hope that you don't get disemboweled before he turns 18. He learns by watching you survive, or not. And if you fall, guess who's supposed to drag your unconscious, armored body back to safety while dodging arrows? Yep, him. Does he get a bed? Only if there's room. Usually, he sleeps in the stables or on the floor near the fire, curled up in a spare cloak that smells like horse sweat. Does he get to bathe? Not unless you fall in a river and he jumps in after you. Does he get paid? Technically, yes, when he becomes a knight. If he becomes a knight. If he lives long enough. If he doesn't get maimed, forgotten, or trampled underfoot during training. Being a squire is supposed to teach humility, loyalty, and martial skill. But mostly, it teaches how to keep your head down and hope your master doesn't wake up cranky. Because when he does, you're the first one he sees, and the first one he orders to do something awful. Still, the squire grits his teeth and endures. Because he has dreams too, dreams of becoming a knight, dreams of his own squire someday. And he tells himself that when the time comes, he'll be different. He won't yell, he won't push. He won't treat his squire like a boot-wiping footnote. But deep down, he knows the truth. The chainmail of suffering passes down through generations. And when his time comes, he'll shout just as loud. Ah, chivalry, the noble code of honor, a knight's sacred oath to protect the weak, serve the just, and act with virtue in all things. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? Like a medieval moral compass, guiding men in metal suits to live with courage, integrity, and romantic restraint. But let's be honest. Chivalry in the Dark Ages wasn't a code. It was a marketing strategy, a reputation booster written by the very people who benefited most from others believing in it. The reality? Knights weren't gentle paragons of virtue. They were professional fighters, muscle for hire, enforcers of lords, raiders of enemy villages, and sometimes just very well-armed thugs. The protect the weak part of the code was often interpreted as protect the weak as long as they belong to your lord. Everyone else? Fair game, peasants, not protected. In fact, peasants were often the ones who suffered most at the hands of knights. Want to test your new sword? Practice on a rebellious farmer. Need a little extra coin? Impose a road toll with the sharp end of your spear. Chivalry didn't prevent cruelty, it just wrapped it in nicer language. And courtly love? Another fantasy. Sure, knights composed poems, swore devotion, and sighed beneath the windows of noble ladies. But the reality of romantic relationships was far messier, and often downright transactional. Marriages were arranged, love was irrelevant, and those lovely courtly poems, often written while the knight was sleeping with someone else entirely. In battle, chivalry meant nothing. Once the fighting started, it was a free-for-all. Knights trampled over the wounded, hacked through anyone in the way, and looted corpses when the dust settled. Honor didn't stop you from crushing a man's skull with a mace. And surrender? That depended on whether your captor wanted ransom money or a reputation for brutality. Even tournaments, those supposedly noble, chivalric sporting events, were bloodbaths. Knights trained for war, not for sportsmanship. Friendly competition often meant broken bones, concussions, and the occasional unintentional beheading. And if a knight died, well, at least he did it for honor or applause. The church loved the idea of chivalry. Lords pushed it hard. Poets romanticized it. But knights themselves, most of them had never read a word of it. Literacy was rare. Codes of conduct weren't laminated scrolls in their saddlebags. They did what they were told, what their lords demanded, or whatever the situation allowed. And when they did act with mercy or dignity, it wasn't always because of some deep commitment to the chivalric ideal. Sometimes it was strategy. Sometimes it was superstition. Sometimes they just didn't feel like getting blood on their good tunic that day. Chivalry wasn't a law. It wasn't enforced. It wasn't even consistent. It was a performance, a facade. A way to tell the world, yes, I crush skulls, but I feel bad about it. So next time someone talks about knights upholding honor and virtue, remember, the only thing most knights upheld was their sword, and maybe their lies. You've heard the tales, trumpets blaring, crowds cheering, noble knights thundering down the jousting field, lances raised, banners fluttering, all for the glory of sport. But what no one tells you is that medieval tournaments weren't quaint little contests. They were organized chaos, they were brutal, and they were dangerous as hell. Yes, tournaments were a form of entertainment, for everyone except the people inside the armor. The most famous part? The joust. Two knights on horseback, charging at each other with wooden lances, aiming to unhorse the other. Sounds simple, it's not. You're galloping at full speed, with barely any visibility through your helmet, trying to hit a moving target with a long, splintering pole, while hoping your horse doesn't veer left at the last second and embarrass you in front of your lord's daughter. And when that lance hits, it doesn't feel like a tap. It feels like a battering ram slamming into your chest. Best case, it breaks on impact. Worst case, it doesn't, and you fly backward off your horse like a sack of mail straight into the dirt. Hopefully, you land somewhere soft, like another unconscious knight. Unhorsed, get up fast. Because the next event is the melee, and this is where things get really ugly. Imagine dozens of armored men on foot, or sometimes on horseback, all swinging swords, axes, and maces at each other in a mock battle. There are rules, sort of. But no referees, no medics, no helmets with safety padding. You can lose an eye, you can break a rib, you can die, and many did, not just from the violence but from the heat. Dehydration in full armor is real. So is heat stroke. So is suffocating in your own sweat while a crowd cheers and someone smashes your faceplate with a flanged mace. And yet, this was seen as practice, a warm-up for real war. Because nothing gets you ready for battle, like suffering multiple concussions in front of an audience eating cold meat pies and shouting your name wrong. Tournaments were also political. Lords and nobles watched closely. A good performance could earn you favor, sponsorship, maybe even a marriage proposal. A bad one? You'd be remembered as the guy who soiled his mail after getting knocked out in the first round. And of course, the winners got prizes. Money, gifts, horses, even land. The losers. They got trampled, mocked, and occasionally carried out on a cart. If you were lucky, your squire retrieved your gear before someone else did. If not, your sword and shield became souvenirs for the crowd. Tournaments weren't for the faint of heart. They weren't sanitized. They weren't safe. They were raw, reckless, and real. A chance to prove yourself or die trying. So when someone tells you that tournaments were elegant sporting events, remember, to the knight in the armor, it was just another day of surviving pain for a little glory and a lot of bruises. Every knight's tale needs a lady, right? That's how the stories go. You ride into battle with her favor tied to your lance, fight in her name, write poetic letters from the front lines, and win her heart with honor and bravery. Sounds romantic, sounds noble. But in reality, it was mostly awkward poetry, secret affairs, jealous husbands, and enough emotional damage to fuel a bard's next 3 songs. Let's start with courtly love. A knight's ideal romance was supposed to be pure and unattainable. A noble lady above your station, married to someone else who you worshipped from afar. You might send her poems written in clumsy Latin. You might carry her embroidered token into battle. And maybe, just maybe, she'd glance at you once during a feast and not immediately leave the room. That was the dream. But behind all that ritualized longing was a world of messy, clandestine relationships. Noble women were married off young, usually for land or alliances. Love didn't enter the equation. So they found other outlets, and sometimes that outlet was you. Not because you were charming or dashing or a literary genius, but because you were nearby, had decent teeth, and weren't their husband. You'd think being the object of secret affection would feel amazing. It doesn't. It feels terrifying. Because if anyone finds out, especially the husband who might be your liege lord, you're dead. Not stern talking to dead. Not fired from your post dead. Hanged by your spurs in public dead. And yet affairs happened. Constantly. Some were passionate, some were strategic, and some were just the medieval version of boredom relief. But all of them were dangerous. Love was political. Every flirtation could be a scandal. Every letter could be intercepted. Every secret meeting had to be timed between mass, meals, and not getting caught. Then there's the poetry. So much bad poetry. Knights wrote verses about glowing eyes, golden hair, divine beauty. Most of it was plagiarized from earlier bards, and the rest was embarrassingly bad. But you had to try. Because romance wasn't just about love, it was about reputation. If you weren't yearning for someone, people assumed something was wrong with you. Of course, the ladies wrote back. Sometimes. Short notes, cryptic glances, tokens sewn into sleeves. But just as often, they laughed behind fans while your poem got passed around the dining hall as comedy. And if you did win someone's heart, congratulations. You now had to dodge rumors, bribe servants, and pray that your next battlefield wound didn't involve a dagger in the back from the jealous husband. So, while the minstrels sang of noble hearts and endless devotion, the real knight knew love was a battlefield far more treacherous than any crusade. It wasn't about honor. It was about surviving lies, managing secrecy, and never trusting a wink at a feast. Because in the end, courtly love didn't protect you, it complicated you. And in a world already full of war, the last thing you needed was romance with a body count. In the stories, marriage is the prize. The reward at the end of a quest. The beautiful noblewoman says yes, the crowd cheers, and the two of you ride off into a sunset glowing with divine approval. But in real medieval life, marriage wasn't about love, it wasn't about chemistry, it wasn't even about compatibility, it was about land, money, heirs, and politics. Always politics. If you're a knight, your marriage is arranged long before you hit puberty. Maybe your lord pairs you off with his cousin to secure your loyalty. Maybe your father cuts a deal with another noble to gain some grazing rights. Maybe you're a second son, and the only match available is a twice-widowed baroness with a questionable temper and excellent sheep. Either way, you don't get a vote. Your bride? Probably just as thrilled as you are. She was raised to know this was coming. From the moment she could stand upright, she was taught how to embroider, smile politely, and prepare for a life of duty disguised as romance. Her opinions are optional, her freedom non-existent. And if you think wedding nights are passionate, think again. They're ceremonial. Awkward, sometimes terrifying, and always expected to result in an heir. Your wedding ceremony isn't all roses and candles. It's more like a business merger with extra incense. Vows are made, hands are joined, maybe there's a feast, if your lord is feeling generous. But once the meal is over and the wine's gone, real life begins. and it's less happily ever after, and more try not to argue about grain taxes before breakfast. Love might come later, but often it doesn't. You're both busy. You're managing land, fighting wars, raising children, and avoiding each other whenever possible. If you're a woman, your job is to survive childbirth multiple times, while also running a household that includes dozens of servants and exactly zero privacy. If you're a man, your job is to keep your family name from being wiped out by bad luck or worse. Politics. Infidelity? Normal. Expected. Quietly ignored unless it causes a scandal. You might sneak around with a serving maid. She might write long letters to a local bard. As long as everyone plays their part and the heirs are legitimate, the system survives. And divorce? Forget it. Not unless you're royalty and the Pope personally intervenes. For everyone else, marriage is permanent. It's not a relationship. It's a contract signed in blood, sealed with duty, and bound by the iron grip of the Church. So, when the bards sing about knights marrying for love, know this: real knights married for property lines, for military alliances, for dowries. Love was a luxury, and one few could afford. You got what you were given, and you made it work, or you didn't. Either way, the wedding bells weren't ringing for joy. They were ringing for obligation. So, you've survived training, mounted your beast without falling off, and even made it through a politically arranged marriage without starting a blood feud. Now, you get to enjoy the privilege of court life, living near your lord or king, surrounded by the elite, sipping wine, making alliances, and enjoying the spoils of your knighthood. That's the fantasy. The reality: court life is a minefield made of whispers, fake smiles, and enough ego to sink a stone castle. From the moment you step into the Great Hall, you're being watched. Not by guards, by everyone. The nobles, the clergy, the stewards, the servants hiding behind pillars, all of them listening to every word you say, every glance you make, every time you scratch something in public. One wrong joke, and suddenly there's a rumor that you insulted the Lord's favorite hunting dog. Again. Everyone at court has an agenda, and most of them involve stepping over your half-dead career to climb one rung higher on the social ladder. Loyalty is a facade. Friendship is a transaction. Flattery is the official language. You're expected to smile at people who want you dead, compliment your rival's daughter, and laugh at the Baron's terrible jokes like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. Want to survive? You need to gossip just enough to stay relevant, but not so much that you get accused of sedition. You have to know who's sleeping with whom, who's broke, who's being blackmailed, and which knight suddenly got a mysterious rash. You're playing chess, but the pieces are alive, and some of them bite. And speaking of biting, courtly feasts, these aren't just meals, they're staged performances of hierarchy. Where you sit matters. What you wear matters. Who you talk to between courses can change your fortune. Smile at the wrong lady, her husband challenges you to a duel. Eat before the bishop, that's a sin and a scandal. Get drunk and call the king's brother a pompous mule. Well, start packing, even the servants play the game. That steward bringing you wine? He's already told 3 people what you muttered under your breath. That page who tripped and spilled broth on your boots? Probably bribed to do it. You learn quickly. Trust no one. Not even your own shadow. It might be working for the Earl of Westgate. And if you think you can escape all this by just being quiet, bad news. Silence is suspicious. If you're not seen, not heard, not praised, you're already forgotten. And in court, being forgotten is the first step toward exile. So, while bards write songs about noble courts filled with laughter and light, the real court is darker, colder, sharper, a stage where every smile hides a knife. And as a knight, you're not just playing the game, You're the pawn, the piece, and the prize. When you picture a medieval feast, you probably imagine long wooden tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, golden goblets brimming with wine, and laughter echoing through grand stone halls. And sure, sometimes that happened. But most of the time, feasting as a knight wasn't a daily reward. It was a rare performance, an illusion of abundance. And when the feast was over, you went right back to chewing bark-flavored bread in a smoky corner. Feasts were for celebrations, victories, births, marriages, or when your lord wanted to show off. As a knight, you didn't organize them, you endured them. You sat where you were told, spoke only when addressed, and tried to eat without looking too desperate. Because here's the truth. While the top table dined on roasted swan and delicately spiced boar, you were gnawing on a dried leg of something that may or may not have once been a goat. Presentation mattered more than flavor. Meat was often overcooked to hide that it was starting to rot. Fish was covered in sauces thick enough to stop a spear, usually because it was no longer strictly fresh. Vegetables, sparse, bread, hard, cheese, sweaty, wine, watered down. Water? Not even offered, unless you wanted to roll the dice on dysentery. You didn't eat to savor. You ate to survive the meal without embarrassing yourself. Try not to stain your tunic. Try not to spill the sauce. Try not to fall asleep before the toasts. And definitely try not to eat too fast or too much. Gluttony was frowned upon, unless you were rich enough that no one dared comment. Meanwhile, servants buzzed around you like gnats, filling platters and removing bones, overhearing conversations they'd later trade for gossip and gold. Above you, the noble family smiled and feigned grace, pretending they didn't see the rats scuttling along the walls behind the tapestries. Entertainment played while you chewed. Minstrels, jugglers, fire breathers if you were lucky, and you had to laugh. If the Lord found the act amusing, so did you. Even if your stomach hurt and your last meal was yesterday's pottage reheated in a cracked bowl. And when the feast ended, you didn't lounge. You got up, bowed, and left. If you weren't already called outside for some minor skirmish or punishment detail. The food you didn't finish was taken by the kitchen staff or tossed into a trough for the pigs, who, frankly, ate better than most peasants. Then, the next morning, it was back to the usual. Stale bread, watery beer, and turnip soup thick enough to patch a wall. The feast was over. The illusion dissolved. And your stomach, still rumbling, remembered what life as a knight actually tasted like. Burnt, bland, and bitter. So, no, feasts weren't a daily luxury. They were a break from reality. A chance to pretend for a few hours that you weren't cold, hungry, and tired of chewing food harder than your own boots. Being a knight isn't just hard work. It's hazardous employment with no job security and an extremely high mortality rate. You're not just training for combat, you're a walking target, a blade magnet, a symbol of everything people love to stab. Enemies? You've got them. Lots of them. Some wear different colors on the battlefield. Others wear the same colors as you and just hate your guts in silence. Rival knights, bitter squires, lords you embarrassed at a feast 2 winters ago, mercenaries with no loyalties, peasants with a grudge. It's open season, and your name's on the list. Start with rival knights. They exist in every court. Men who think your victory was luck, your fame undeserved, your marriage a scandal. They nod politely in public, then spend the rest of their time plotting your downfall with the grace of a drunken blacksmith. And if you cross swords in a tournament, they hit harder, not to win, but to maim. A cracked rib, a dislocated shoulder, a humiliating fall in front of your peers. They live for that. Then there's your actual battlefield enemies. You're a visible, clanking, high-value target. Peasants run. Archers aim for the guy in shiny armor. You think your helmet makes you look noble? It also makes you stand out like a prize cow. Enemy foot soldiers are told, "Bring me that knight's head and you eat tonight." Guess who they're charging? Don't forget raiders, bandits, rebels. During peacetime, you might be tasked with maintaining order. That means walking into angry villages and enforcing laws the people didn't make and don't like. Which means you're not just hated, you're despised. And peasants don't forget a face. Especially not one wrapped in iron, holding a tax scroll. Even your own side can turn on you. Politics shift, alliances change. One day, you're a trusted knight in Lord Everhart's service. The next, you're an inconvenient witness, standing between him and a better marriage deal. And conveniently, you're sent on a dangerous but noble quest that ends with your horse returning and you mysteriously not. Assassination isn't rare. Poisons, accidents, or just a dagger in the ribs during a dark hallway walk. You make enemies faster than you make friends, and fewer of them send you letters. So, you watch your back. Constantly. You trust your squire with your sword, but maybe not your secrets. You drink last, never first. You sleep light. You wake up to sounds that no one else hears. And if you die, well, let's hope someone likes you enough to carry your body home. Or else you're just another armored corpse rotting in the mud. Maybe looted, maybe eaten, definitely forgotten. So if you thought being a knight meant respect, think again. It means attention. And attention, in the Dark Ages, is a sword pointed directly at your throat. So you've insulted someone. Maybe you stepped in front of the wrong noble at court. Maybe your horse outperformed theirs in the last hunt. Maybe you accidentally won a duel you weren't supposed to win. Either way, you've crossed a line. And in the world of knights, there's only one socially accepted way to settle a dispute. Try to kill each other in front of a crowd. Welcome to the medieval duel, a blend of legal proceeding, blood sport, and public entertainment. It's not about justice, it's about who bleeds slower. Dueling isn't some rare, dramatic climax. It's routine. Disputes over land, insults, honor, or even spilled wine at a feast can all escalate to a challenge. All someone has to do is say you've dishonored them, and boom, you're summoned to a field, armed, armored, and fully expected to risk your life to prove you were right about that comment on their falcon breeding techniques. There are rules, sort of, but they change depending on the region, the social class of the duelists, or who the local judge favors. Some duels are fought to first blood, others to incapacitation, and the truly vicious ones, to death. But even those often end with one knight on the ground, bleeding out while the crowd debates whether he learned his lesson. Here's the worst part. The winner is legally right. Not morally, not factually, just officially, because clearly God favored their sword hand. You can be telling the truth, backed by witnesses, documentation, and the sympathy of everyone watching. Doesn't matter. If the other guy skewers you through the ribs, you're wrong now. The weapons vary, swords, maces, axes, whatever you can carry. Sometimes you're on foot, sometimes on horseback. Occasionally, you're in a pit with a shield in one hand and a club in the other while your opponent hurls insults and haymakers in equal measure. And the armor? You better have the good set. Because if you go into a duel with your training gear or a dented helm, you're not defending your honor. You're volunteering for a concussion. Spectators love it. Lords attend. Nobles place bets. Peasants sneak in just to watch people with titles beat each other senseless. It's the medieval version of reality TV. Only instead of reputations getting shredded, it's your collarbone. And if you refuse a duel, coward, that's your reputation ruined. You're no longer a man of honor. Other knights avoid you. Lords question your loyalty. You're socially dead, even if you're physically very much alive and enjoying your functional spine. So you fight. Not because you want to, but because you have to. Your name, your land, your future, all riding on how well you can dodge a blade after 3 hours of praying and vomiting in your helmet. Justice, in the hands of the sword, is just a gamble. And for knights, every duel is one more spin of the blade. Win or lose, blood is always the final word. Being a knight isn't just about battles and blood. It's also about prayer. Lots of it. Because in the Dark Ages, your soul was considered just as important as your sword arm, and twice as likely to get you killed if you didn't treat it properly. Religion isn't a part of your life. It is your life. The church doesn't sit on the sidelines offering guidance. It runs the game. Every hour of your day is carved up by bells, rituals, and reminders that hell is always watching, and God is always just slightly disappointed in you. Before you eat, pray. Before battle, pray harder. After you've slaughtered someone, definitely pray, because if you die with sin on your soul, it's straight to eternal fire. And that's not just abstract fear. The sermons paint it vividly. Demons pulling your intestines out, lakes of molten lead, eternal screaming. You hear it every Sunday, delivered by a priest who stares directly into your eyes the entire time. You want to confess your sins? Good, because they're watching. That lie you told, that tavern visit last week, that incident behind the stables, the church keeps score, and they have the power to ruin you. Excommunication isn't just being kicked out of church, it's social death. No sacraments, no alliances, no burial in consecrated ground. You become a cursed man in life and death. As a knight, you're expected to uphold the ideals of Christian virtue, protect the weak, serve the church, and act in the name of righteousness. But let's be real. Half your job involves stabbing people. So you spend your free time sponsoring chapels, donating to monasteries, and kneeling in cold stone churches, hoping that coins and penance cancel out the sins you racked up on the battlefield. You fast when told. You attend Mass, sometimes daily. You kiss relics, bones of saints, drops of blood in glass vials, occasionally a suspicious-looking tooth. And you act reverent even if you're not sure what you're looking at. Because doubt, that's dangerous. Heresy can get you flogged, tortured, or burned at the stake. And your reading options? None. The Bible's in Latin. You can't read. You rely on the church to explain what God wants, and they're never short on interpretation. You wear crosses into battle. You pray for victory. You promise to go on crusade if you survive. You make vows in panic and forget them by the time your wounds heal. Then the priest reminds you. And suddenly, you're preparing to ride halfway across the world because you swore something under pressure and now God might be watching. Even your death is orchestrated. When you're dying, a priest must be summoned. Last rites must be given. If not, you risk dying unshriven, meaning your soul floats off into darkness, untouched by grace, permanently excluded from paradise. It's not a peaceful exit, it's spiritual terror. So yes, you fight for your Lord, but you live for the church. And if you forget that, even for a moment, there's a very real chance you'll be reminded, through fear, guilt, or fire. You've made your vows, you've prayed your prayers, and now the church calls. A holy war, a divine mission, a chance to save your soul, prove your valor, and maybe, just maybe, earn eternal glory. Welcome to the Crusades. Now pack your things and prepare to walk straight into hell. The Pope makes the offer sound irresistible. Travel to the Holy Land, fight the enemies of God, and all your sins are forgiven. Sounds like a heavenly deal, until you realize that travel means marching thousands of miles on foot through unfamiliar terrain, sleeping in the dirt, eating moldy bread, and hoping your knees don't give out before you even see a battlefield. You're not going alone. You're part of a ragged column of knights, mercenaries, squires, cooks, thieves, and deeply confused peasants who heard salvation and signed up before asking any questions. The logistics are a nightmare. Supplies run out before the second month. Horses die, water turns poisonous, people get lost, others get killed over stolen boots. And then there's the heat. The Holy Land isn't like home. The sun doesn't just shine, it scorches. Your armor becomes an oven, your helmet a personal torture device. You sweat constantly, then dehydrate, then vomit, then pray. And the prayers? They start sounding more like bargaining than devotion. When the fighting begins, it's not noble, it's not clean, it's chaos. Cities burn, civilians die. Entire populations are slaughtered in the name of faith. You thought this was about honor. It's about territory, wealth, and vengeance. The rules of war don't apply. And neither does mercy. The enemy isn't faceless. They fight like you, bleed like you. Sometimes they're better armed, better trained, better fed. The stories of easy victories turn out to be myths. You lose friends, you lose your horse. You might even lose a limb. If you survive, you're left with scars and a conscience full of contradictions. You expected glory. You get dysentery. You expected divine favor. You get a sword through your thigh and a sermon from a bishop who's never touched a weapon. Your banner might still wave, but your faith starts to fray. Because everything here is harder, bloodier, and more confusing than the church ever promised. And when it's finally over, if it's over, you don't return home to parades and praise. You return a stranger. The land you left has changed. Your lord might be dead, your estate in debt, and the people you fought for, they barely remember why you went. You ride back with sunburned skin, haunted eyes, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, all that horror bought you a better place in the afterlife. But deep down, you know the truth. You went to war for God and came back wondering if he was ever watching. You trained for this. You prayed for this. You dreamed of glory, of charging into battle with your banner flying and your enemies falling like wheat before the harvest. But when the moment comes, when the horn sounds, the earth shakes under 1,000 boots, and steel begins to scream. Your first thought isn't about honor. It's about how bad it smells. The battlefield reeks. Sweat, blood, manure, and fear, all mixing in the air like a cursed stew. You can barely breathe inside your helmet. The visor fogs up. Your heart's pounding like a war drum, your grip's already slipping from the sweat pouring down your arms, and you haven't even swung your sword yet. Then the chaos begins. Battle isn't like training. It's not organized. There are no choreographed duels, no elegant footwork, no clean kills. It's confusion, panic, and sound. Screaming men, screaming horses, weapons clashing, bones snapping, people crying for help and others praying while they bleed out underfoot. You charge, swing, miss, stumble, recover, get hit, panic, and swing again. There's no time to think. You don't know who you're hitting half the time. Armor offers protection but not immunity. One lucky blow to your visor, a dagger in a weak spot, or a mace to the ribs, and that's it. Lights out. You see things you can't unsee, friends screaming with limbs missing, men crushed by horses, a knight dragging his own entrails, trying to crawl to a ditch. There's mud everywhere, and it's not all mud. You slip, you fall, you barely get up. And through it all, the screaming never stops. And if you do win, if your side holds the field, then comes the part no one ever sings about. The looting, the scavenging, the finishing off of the wounded. You go from knight to butcher in seconds, stabbing half-dead men because they might still be dangerous, or just because someone ordered you to. You search bodies for valuables. You strip armor from corpses still twitching. You cut fingers to get rings off faster. Later, you sit by the fire, surrounded by wounded comrades. The air still smells like death. Your shoulders numb, your legs bleeding, and you haven't eaten in 16 hours. Someone's singing. Someone else is vomiting. You stare at your blood-stained sword and realize you don't even remember who it killed. This is battle, not banners and songs, not honor and glory. Just a long, deafening, gut-wrenching nightmare in steel and mud, where the only thing more painful than losing is surviving. Every knight dreams of his sword, forged in fire, perfectly balanced, a shining extension of his own hand, the symbol of justice, power, and nobility. But here's what they don't tell you. Once you actually start using it, your sword becomes less of a glorious weapon and more of a frustrating, high-maintenance, frequently useless hunk of metal. First, it's heavy. Not absurdly so, but after swinging it a few dozen times while wearing 60 pounds of armor and dodging enemies in a mud pit, it starts to feel like a steel anvil strapped to your arm. Your forearm burns, your shoulder spasms. You grip it tighter, which only makes the blisters worse, and swords aren't indestructible. They chip, they dull, they bend, hit a helmet the wrong way, and congratulations, you just cracked your edge. Hit bone, and you might feel it vibrate through your wrist like a bad omen. Miss completely and strike the ground? Now, the point's buried in dirt, stuck between rocks and shame. Also, swords are terrible in tight spaces. In a narrow alley, in a cramped corridor, or when you're buried in bodies. Suddenly, you've got this long metal stick that requires space you simply don't have. Daggers are better in close quarters. Axes break shields faster. Spears keep enemies at bay. Your sword, it just gets caught on everything. And don't get too attached, you might lose it. One wrong swing and your grip slips. You drop it in the mud. Someone kicks it away, you fall off your horse and it skitters across the battlefield. Now you're scrambling to pick it up while someone else is trying to introduce their weapon to your skull. And drawing your sword, it's not as smooth as the movies. The scabbard gets stuck. The blade catches on your cloak. You fumble it, especially when your fingers are numb from cold or shaking with fear. And if you draw too early, you look like a fool. Too late? You're already bleeding. Plus, swords are expensive. A good one costs a fortune. You don't get it for free. You maintain it like a pet, sharpening, oiling, cleaning, checking the hilt, praying the pommel doesn't snap off mid-swing. And if you lose it in battle, you're not just unarmed. You've lost your status, your symbol, your name. That blade was your identity. So yes, a sword can save your life. It can also get you killed. It's only as good as your strength, your training, and your luck on the worst day of your life. And sometimes even that's not enough. Because in the end, a sword doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a guy carrying a very sharp, very expensive problem into a very stupid situation. Let's say you survived the battle. You didn't get skewered, trampled, or set on fire. Congratulations. You walk away with a few cuts, maybe a shallow stab wound, a nasty gash across your thigh, nothing fatal, or so you think. But in the Dark Ages, you don't die on the battlefield. You die after, slowly, silently, from something you can't see but will absolutely feel. Welcome to the real medieval killer, infection. There's no concept of germs, no sterilization, no antiseptics. A bloody rag and a whispered prayer is as close to medical care as you're going to get. Your wounds are bound with dirty cloth, touched by hands that have already treated 5 other men and washed in nothing. If you're lucky, they pour wine on it. If you're not, they just wrap it and say, "You'll be fine." You won't be. The wound festers, it swells. The skin turns red, then black. Pus leaks out. The pain becomes constant. Deep, throbbing, sharp at times, dull at others but never gone. You get a fever. You start to shake. Your teeth chatter. You hallucinate. You curse your sword. You curse your squire. You curse the rat that probably bit your bandage while you slept. Soon the wound smells. Not like sweat, not like blood, like rot. Your friends start to avoid you. The camp priest visits more often. You know what that means. They might try to drain it. That involves knives, heated iron, screaming. They might even try to cut the limb off entirely. On a table, in the mud, with a saw that looks like it was last used on a fence post. And there's no pain relief, no morphine, no anesthesia. Just biting down on a stick and praying you don't wake up halfway through the amputation. If you do, the pain might kill you. If you don't, infection still might. Some survive, most don't. Even a splinter can turn into a death sentence if it gets deep enough and sits too long. Your immune system is already busy trying to fight off malnutrition, lice, and whatever was floating in last night's stew. And if you do die, your body's dumped in a pit with others who smelled like you. No headstone, no ceremony, just dirt, flies, and silence. A night felled not by a sword, but by something no one could see and no one could stop. That's the real end for many warriors. Not a glorious last stand, not a battlefield ballad. Just a fever in the dark, a wound that won't close, and the creeping knowledge that all the armor in the world can't protect you from the filth beneath your own skin. So you're sick, feverish, dizzy. You've got chills, maybe vomiting, or your arm looks like it belongs to a corpse. In today's world, you'd call a doctor, get antibiotics, rest, and recover. But in the Dark Ages, healing wasn't science. It was improvisation with knives and leeches. And your best hope? The local medic, whose qualifications include superstition, confidence, and probably no actual medical training. First, he'll diagnose you using the sacred medieval method, guesswork. Maybe you've got bad blood. Maybe your humors are out of balance. According to the most advanced medical theories of the time, your body is a bag of 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And if you feel like you're dying, it's because one of them is winning. The solution? Let's drain it. Bleeding is the go-to treatment for almost everything. Headache, bleed, infection, bleed, sadness, guilt, an upset stomach, bleed. The idea is that by opening a vein, your body will release the sickness. All it actually releases is your strength, your consciousness, and any chance of getting better. And the tools? Barbaric. A dull blade, a rusty needle, a leech if they're feeling fancy. The medic might bleed you from your arm, your ankle, your neck. Any vein will do. Sometimes they take so much that patients faint. That's considered a sign that it's working. If that doesn't help, prepare for the backup treatments: purging and sweating. You'll be given herbs, or worse, a concoction made of animal parts and hope, to make you vomit or soil yourself violently. Then you'll be wrapped in blankets beside a fire until you sweat enough to expel the poison. What's really being expelled is your will to live. Broken bone? They'll try to set it with splints made from sticks and cloth. It'll heal crooked, assuming it doesn't get infected first. Toothache? The answer's always the same. Rip it out with pliers that have never been cleaned. They'll do it by candlelight, often in the same room where someone just died of plague. And if you're lucky enough to be rich, you might get a barber surgeon. Yes, the guy who cuts your hair also cuts into your flesh. He travels with razors, saws, and questionable ideas. He might attempt tree panning, drilling a hole in your skull to let out the demons, or cauterization, where they burn your wound shut with red-hot iron and zero anesthesia. Recovery is a gamble. Some men survive, others die of the treatment instead of the illness. Either way, the medic leaves feeling accomplished. If you live, he claims credit. If you die, well, it was God's will. So if you ever think medieval warfare was the scariest part of knighthood, remember this: the real nightmare begins after the battle, when the man holding a saw is also your barber, and the cure might kill you faster than the disease. You survived the battle. You even survived the treatment. The wounds scab over, the bruises fade, and you're sent back into service like nothing ever happened. But inside, something's broken. Your hands shake. Your sleep's a horror show. Every sudden noise makes you reach for a weapon. You don't know what it is, and no one around you understands it either. Because in the Dark Ages, trauma doesn't have a name. It has a stigma. Today, we'd call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But back then, it's just called weakness, or sin, or cowardice. You're told to get over it, to pray harder, to fight more. Because if you're a knight, you're not supposed to feel anything except loyalty and rage. You start to change. You drink more. You sleep less. You avoid feasts, skip mass, flinch when someone slams a door. You keep replaying the same moments. Your friend screaming as he bled out, the sound of bone breaking under your mace, the eyes of the man you stabbed who looked too much like you. But if you talk about it, people look at you like you're cursed, or worse, weak. Your squire notices. He asks if you're all right. You snap at him. You don't mean to. You apologize, but he avoids you for the rest of the day. You ride through the village and think you see faces you lost in battle. You wake up with your sword in hand, heart racing, sweat pouring down your neck. The nightmares are so vivid, you start sleeping in your armor. And when you do open up, maybe to a priest, maybe to a fellow knight, you're told to confess, to cleanse your soul, to show more discipline, to remember your duty, as if duty is a salve for the deep wound inside you, as if the weight in your chest can be prayed away. There's no healing. There's no understanding. The mental scars are invisible, so no one tends them. Instead, you bury it, push it down, wrap it in silence and chainmail. You keep fighting, keep serving, keep pretending. And every time you go back to war, another piece of you stays behind in the mud, in the screams, in the places where the sunlight never returns. You become a ghost long before you die. And when you finally do, people will speak of your valor, your courage, your reputation, but not your pain. Never your pain. Because in a world without words for trauma, suffering in silence isn't noble. It's expected. Forget the battlefield. Winter is the real war. When the sun disappears, when the roads vanish under snow and mud, and when food becomes a rumor rather than a reality, the medieval knight isn't fighting enemies. He's fighting the cold, and the cold doesn't care about your rank, your training, or your armor. It just waits, silent and merciless. Your castle is a stone box. The fire in the great hall gives off more smoke than heat. The walls weep moisture. The wind finds every crack and howls through the corridors like a ghost that never shuts up. You sleep in your clothes, not because you want to, but because undressing means freezing. And your blanket? A thin, lice-ridden wool sheet that does nothing but smell like mildew and disappointment. You wake up to ice in your water pitcher. Not near it. In it. Your boots are stiff from frost. Your fingers ache just putting them on. And once you step outside, the world becomes a sheet of frozen misery. Snow soaks through your hose, mud sucks at your boots, and even your breath feels like it's trying to murder you from the inside. Training doesn't stop. Horses still need riding. Weapons still need swinging. Except now, your joints scream with every movement. You try to spar, but your sword slips from numb fingers. Your shield arm refuses to lift. And the only thing harder than fighting in winter is staying healthy in it. Because winter means sickness, constant coughing, fevers, infections that settle deep in your lungs and never quite leave. There's no vitamin C, no antibiotics. You catch a chill in the wrong moment, and your next title isn't Sir, it's buried by spring. Food? Scarce. The stores in the larder are dwindling. Bread goes hard, meat goes bad, ale freezes. You chew by the fire in silence, knowing every bite you take means one less tomorrow. And if you're on campaign, in the field, you sleep under the stars, wrapped in a damp cloak, listening to your own teeth click like a pair of dice being rolled for your survival. Then there's the isolation. Travel is nearly impossible. No trade caravans, no messengers, no reinforcements. You sit, huddled with the same grumbling men, waiting out the weather while the days blur together into a gray, endless haze. Time slows, tempers rise, morale plummets. And if you're unlucky enough to be under siege during winter, you don't starve quickly. You starve slowly, desperately. Nobles start eating dogs, soldiers start boiling leather. And when that runs out, people start looking at each other with the wrong kind of hunger. Winter isn't romantic. It's not picturesque. It's a siege laid by nature itself. And nature never runs out of patience. It waits and it watches, and every day it whispers the same question. How much longer can you last? So, winter nearly killed you with cold, starvation, and cabin fever. But you made it. Spring thawed the roads, the fields are turning green, and for a brief moment you dare to believe things are looking up. Then summer arrives, and brings something far worse than snow. It brings the plague, and not just the plague, not always the Black Death. That comes later. But summer, for centuries, is the season of sickness. Heat turns filth into fumes. Stagnant water becomes a breeding ground. Rats multiply. Flies swarm. Everything smells like sweat, rot, and the slow fermentation of disease. And when the wind shifts just right, you can smell death coming before you even hear the coughing. You don't understand how it works. No one does. The word infection doesn't exist yet. People think disease comes from bad air, moral failings, or, if they're feeling spiritual, divine punishment for that one time you skipped mass and drank too much ale. It starts slow, a cough, a fever, then boils, vomiting, black spots. People collapse mid-step. One day they're helping in the stables, the next they're dead in a cart. Entire villages go quiet. Doors are marked with symbols. Streets empty out. Dogs roam freely, and priests carry bells and prayers into houses no one wants to enter. If it hits your castle, it spreads fast. You eat together, sleep near each other, share water. Armor gets passed around, never cleaned. Your squire coughs once, and now you're counting the hours. You pray, you sweat, you isolate, but it won't matter. Once it gets in, it takes who it wants, and there is no cure. The doctors, if you can call them that, arrive wearing masks shaped like birds. They stuff herbs in the beak to filter the bad air. They poke, prod, bleed you, burn incense, and then tell you to prepare your soul. When they start backing away instead of treating you, you know what it means. Panic spreads faster than the disease. People flee, but they carry it with them. Markets shut down. Fields go unharvested. The roads become graveyards. Knights, peasants, merchants. No one is spared. And you, the brave warrior in full armor, are powerless against a cough. You can't duel it. You can't ride away from it. All you can do is wait. If you survive, congratulations. You're likely thinner, traumatized, and surrounded by fewer friends than you had last season. The world feels smaller, quieter, and darker. And summer no longer feels like a blessing. It feels like a countdown. Because in the Dark Ages, death doesn't always charge at you with a sword. Sometimes it floats on the breeze, invisible, silent, and patient. When you think of medieval warfare, you probably imagine charging cavalry, clashing swords, heroic last stands. But siege warfare? That's none of that. Siege warfare is waiting, rotting, breaking down. It's not a fight. It's a test of how long you can survive inside a stone box while everything around you falls apart. Here's how it begins. You're in a castle. Safe, you think. Then word comes that an enemy army is approaching. You rush to reinforce the gates, stockpile food, fill the wells, and hope to whatever saint is listening that someone remembered to bring extra arrows. Because once the siege begins, you're not leaving. The enemy surrounds the castle. No one in, no one out. They set up tents, build siege engines, and wait. If they're ambitious, they'll try to batter down the walls. More likely, they'll starve you out. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. And every day your world gets smaller. Food, gone within the first few weeks. Rations get tighter, bread gets thinner. You eat dried beans, old meat, rats, if you can catch them. Eventually, anything edible becomes fair game. Leather shoes, candle wax, dogs, cats. If things get bad enough, each other. Don't pretend it never happened. It did. Water? You hope you have a well. If not, you collect rain, or worse, reuse what you can't believe you're reusing. Sanitation? Forget it. The courtyard becomes a toilet. Disease spreads. One sick soldier in the hall becomes 10 in a day. By the second month, your biggest enemy isn't the army outside, it's your own stomach. And the fear. Every night you lie awake, wondering if they'll scale the walls, sneak through the postern gate, or collapse the tower from underneath. Because siege warfare isn't just waiting, it's digging. Sappers dig tunnels to collapse your walls. You dig counter-tunnels. And when those tunnels meet, they don't stop and talk. They fight in the dark, by torchlight with picks and daggers. Then there's the psychological warfare. The enemy might throw disease-ridden corpses over the walls, or severed heads, or send messages promising mercy if you surrender, and describing in detail what they'll do to you if you don't. Morale begins to rot faster than the food. Sometimes the siege ends with a relief army saving the day. But more often, you surrender. Or the gate gets smashed. Or someone inside opens it to save their own skin, and when that happens, the real horror begins. Because once the enemy breaches the walls, there's no more rules, no more honor, no more mercy. It's looting, burning, slaughter. You fight not for glory, but to die with a sword in your hand instead of a dagger in your back. Siege warfare isn't a test of courage. It's a countdown to collapse. And if you ever find yourself stuck inside those walls, you'll learn the hard truth. Victory isn't survival. It's just being the last one who hasn't starved. You thought being a knight meant feasting in great halls, tossing back roasted meat and ale between tournaments. That was before the siege, before the harvest failed, before the supply lines were cut. Now, all you're tossing back is your stomach lining, because starvation has a way of turning meals into memories. Your rations, once merely bland, are now insulting. A handful of dried beans. A scrap of hard bread you have to soak in water to make chewable. Some salted fish that's more salt than fish and smells like someone already chewed it once. And when that runs out, things get inventive. Boiled leather, candle wax, bark shaved from trees. If it vaguely resembles food and doesn't kill you instantly, it's on the menu. The castle's rats disappear one by one. The dogs, too. Eventually, even your horse looks less like a companion and more like a potential roast, though killing it means losing your last way out if things go south. Salt becomes currency. You need it to preserve whatever scraps of meat remain, but even a pinch is more valuable than gold. People trade it for food, for favors, for secrets, and without it, the meat rots faster than you can eat it. Not that you're eating much anyway, because the worst part isn't hunger. It's what hunger does to people. You start to lie, to hoard, to resent. You eye your fellow knights not as comrades, but as competition. Who's hiding food? Who's wasting theirs? Who's too weak to notice if something goes missing? Cooking smells like desperation. Meals are taken in silence. Bowls are licked clean. Not because the food was good, but because it's the only one you'll get today. Maybe this week your ribs poke through your tunic, your belt tightens again. You lose weight until your armor no longer fits, until it clangs loosely against your bones. And yet you still train, you still patrol, you still serve, because that's what's expected. That's what being a knight means. But your movements are sluggish, your strikes slow, your vision blurry. You're not fighting to defend your lord anymore. You're just trying not to pass out before sunset. Some give up. Others go mad. The hunger gnaws at your body, your mind, your sense of self. You used to be proud, strong, invincible. Now you're cold, dizzy, and chewing the corner of your boot because you dreamed it tasted like meat. And when the siege finally ends, or the famine lifts, or someone smuggles in supplies, you eat, you gorge, you cry while eating. But the shame lingers. The memory of what you became, what you did, what you almost did, because in the end, starvation doesn't just kill the body, it kills the knight inside it. So, you've lost the battle. You've fallen from your horse, your sword's gone, your arm is broken, and now you're lying in the mud with someone's boot on your back. You're not dead yet, because as a knight your death isn't always immediate. Sometimes it's negotiable. Welcome to captivity. If you're lucky and valuable, your captors won't kill you. Not right away. They'll strip you of your armor, drag you to the rear of the battlefield, and start the real war, the one over money. Because you, Sir Knight, are worth a ransom. Maybe, if you have land, or a title, or a lord who gives a damn. Your captors send word to your family or liege lord, pay a sum, and we'll return him. Don't pay, and we'll decide what's left of him is useful as fertilizer. The letter is formal. The threats are not. While you wait, you rot. You're thrown into a wooden cage or a damp dungeon. There's no bed, just straw infested with fleas, and the faint memory of better men who slept there and didn't leave. You're fed enough to not die, but not enough to live well. Stale bread, rotten onions, water that tastes like it came from the bottom of a forgotten moat. No clean clothes, no bandages, no medicine. If you're wounded, the infection becomes your roommate. If you're sick, you become a burden, and burdens don't last long in enemy territory. The guards might mock you, spit on you, use you as entertainment. Some might respect you, former knights, now jailers. They'll talk to you like they understand, because they do. They've been there. If your captors are merciful, they keep you alive until the ransom's paid. If they're not, you disappear. Some prisoners are blinded. Some are mutilated to prevent escape. Some are used as examples, paraded through enemy villages in chains. And some are never seen again. But let's say your lord agrees to the ransom. That's not the end. The money has to be delivered, counted, verified, and while that happens, you wait and wait and wait, because soon in medieval time means eventually, and you're on a diet of damp bread and existential dread. Then, finally, you're released. Thinner, weaker, eyes sunken, spirit cracked. You return to your castle a little slower, a little quieter. People cheer, but only a little, because you're no longer the invincible warrior. You're the one who got caught, and if no one pays, you stay until they forget your name, or until your captors decide that your skull makes a better cup than your company. Captivity doesn't always end in death, but it always ends in damage, because in a world where valor is a currency, being captured isn't just a setback. It's an unpaid debt you carry for the rest of your life. You might be strong. You might be trained. You might wear 60 pounds of armor and swing a sword like it's an extension of your arm. But none of that matters when the plague arrives. Because the plague doesn't care how many enemies you've slain or how many banners you've flown. It doesn't care about your code, your knighthood, or your prayers. It just kills you. And worse, it kills everything around you first. It starts with rumors. A merchant coughing in a nearby town, a priest who collapsed during Mass, a ship that docked 2 weeks ago and left behind more than cargo. Then the real signs appear. The black swellings, the fevers, the stink of death that rides the wind long before the infected arrive. When it hits, it moves fast. A castle goes quiet. Guards vanish, servants flee, your comrades start to cough, then shake, then bleed. 1 minute they're sharpening swords, the next they're being hauled away on a cart, covered in a thin, grimy sheet that does nothing to hide the horror beneath. You try to leave, you can't. The roads are closed. Towns bar their gates. Villages set fires at the edge of the forest and dare you to come closer. Even other knights won't let you in, because you might carry it. You probably carry it. Doctors wear masks shaped like birds. They wave incense and mutter prayers, but they don't touch you. They don't help you. They're just there to witness. The church tells you it's divine punishment. The nobles tell you it's bad luck. But you, sitting in your cold room, holding a shaking hand that used to be your squire's, you know it's a death sentence. And your armor? Useless. You could be wrapped in the finest steel and it wouldn't stop the cough from turning your lungs into soup. The disease finds the cracks, the weaknesses. It doesn't need a blade. It just needs time. Burial becomes a formality. There are too many bodies, not enough space. Pits are dug. Fires burn. Sometimes the bodies are just left where they fall because no one wants to get close. Not even to say goodbye. You hear of entire armies wiped out before a single battle, of lords dying in their great halls, of priests refusing to perform last rites because the last 10 they visited didn't survive the week. No one is safe. No one is spared, not the noble, not the knight, not the child hiding behind castle walls. In the end, you sit alone. Not from choice, but because everyone else is gone. Your sword lies on the floor, untouched. Your armor hangs by the fire, polished and ready. But the enemy is already inside you, and no amount of bravery will keep it from winning. You've made it. Somehow. Through battles, wounds, winters, sieges, disease, betrayal, and enough trauma to fill a monastery's worth of confessions. You're older now, slower. Your sword arm aches in the morning. Your knees sound like a gravel road. The battlefield doesn't call your name anymore. But don't think for a second that retirement means rest. You don't retire from being a knight. You just stop getting summoned. Maybe you were granted a small manor. Maybe you live off a meager pension from your lord. Maybe you moved into a relative's home who regrets inviting you every time you cough too loudly. Either way, you've traded your warhorse for a walking stick, and your banner now hangs in a dusty hall no one enters. Your days are filled with the pain you used to ignore. Old wounds throb when it rains. Scars itch. One of your shoulders doesn't work right since that time you took a lance to the collarbone. You can't ride. You can't train. You can barely lift a mug without something popping. But people still expect you to be that knight. They want stories. They want advice. They want you to sit in a corner by the fire and nod wisely while they prepare for glories you know will end in blood and silence. What they don't see is the nightmares, the ones that wake you up sweating, swordless, breathless, or the loneliness, your squires long gone. The men you fought beside, buried, crippled, or lost in their own versions of this same slow decay. No one sings songs about retired knights. There are no poems for the man who limps to the market, whose fingers can't hold a quill, whose voice shakes when talking about the war. And the young? They pass you in the halls like a relic. Useful for a moment, but mostly just in the way. You try to stay useful. Teach a few boys to hold a blade. Advise on fortifications. Sit in council meetings where no one listens. And when your body fails entirely, you sit in a chair by the window, wrapped in a cloak, watching the road, not waiting for anything, just remembering. Eventually, someone says you're ill, the priest visits, again. Your last rites feel more like a formality than a comfort. You've already died in pieces, on muddy fields, in firelit duels, in every friend you buried. Now, your body's just catching up. And when you go, it's quiet. A funeral attended by a few. A name spoken softly. Maybe a sword placed on your chest for tradition's sake. Maybe not. You dreamed of glory. You got survival. And in the end, that's all knighthood ever really promised. You'd think after years of swinging swords, riding into battle, and dodging plague carts, you'd have earned a little peace. Maybe even some respect. But no, because while war might end with a wound, politics kills with a whisper. As a knight, you're not just a soldier. You're a piece on a game board. A valuable one sometimes, a disposable one always. You serve a lord. That lord serves a duke. The duke serves a king. And behind all of them, lies, promises. Alliances so fragile they crumble faster than your sword arm during winter. Court isn't a place for warriors. It's a nest. A tangle of nobles smiling with knives behind their backs, pretending your service matters while discussing whether they can replace you with someone more obedient. Your reputation, your victories, your loyalty, it's all currency, and currency gets spent. You fight one too many battles in someone else's name, you're a threat. You back the wrong heir during a succession dispute, you're a traitor. You get too close to someone above your station, you're ambitious, and that's dangerous. Power moves in silence, and when it does, people like you are usually in the way. One day, you're at a feast, seated near your lord, drinking carefully, complimenting carefully, laughing when everyone else laughs. The next, you're reassigned to the farthest border post, because someone whispered that your victories were making others uncomfortable. Or worse, you're summoned for advice, only to find armed guards waiting. No trial, no explanation, just a locked door and a slow poison in your wine. The kind that lets you die with dignity, because they still need your reputation to stay clean. And exile, that's the kind punishment. Sent away with a horse, a sack of coins, and a silent threat. Disappear, or we'll make you disappear. So you ride out, not as a fallen knight, but as an inconvenient memory they'd rather bury in the woods than under a banner. The saddest part, it's not personal. No one hates you. No one cares enough to. It's just politics. Just strategy. And you, knight of 100 battles, are just collateral damage in a game you were never really playing. In the end, your sword won you fame. But your silence could have saved your life. You've probably heard the phrase, noblesse oblige, the noble obligation. The idea that knights and lords have a sacred duty to protect those beneath them. That honor means service, and power means responsibility. It's a beautiful concept. It's also complete nonsense. Because in practice, being a knight isn't about protecting the weak. It's about enforcing someone else's power. You don't guard villages because it's the right thing to do. You do it because your lord told you to, or because the harvest is due, or because someone's behind on taxes and you're the muscle sent to remind them. The peasants don't love you, they fear you. And why wouldn't they? When they see a knight riding in, they don't see a protector. They see a sword, a mailed fist, a reminder that their lives are not entirely their own. You might ride through their fields, crushing their crops. You might confiscate their grain. You might be the reason their son is being marched off to die in a war they never agreed to. But you tell yourself it's for the greater good. That order must be maintained, that the world is safer with knights like you in it. And maybe it is, but not for them. Meanwhile, the nobles above you, the ones who speak of duty and virtue, sit in their halls drinking wine older than most peasants will ever live to be. They write letters about justice and honor, then send you to burn a village that didn't pay its tribute. If you question them, you're insubordinate. If you refuse, you're replaced. And if you get killed doing their dirty work, they send a letter of condolences to your widow. Maybe a silver coin, maybe not. And the church? They bless your campaigns, tell you you're righteous, remind you to confess before you slaughter. But when it's over, they collect the tithe and look away when the spoils are divided. You were taught that being a knight was a sacred calling, that you served God, king, and country. But now you see the truth. You serve landlords, bureaucrats in armor, the descendants of people who took power centuries ago and convinced everyone it was divine right. Noblesse oblige isn't real, it's a script, a story told by those in charge to keep everyone beneath them swinging swords and plowing fields. You're part of that story, a glorified footnote, armed, obedient, replaceable. You didn't rise to power. You were handed a uniform and told it meant something. And the worst part? You believed it. You've pledged oaths. You've served loyally. You've risked your life more times than you can count. And ironically, that's partly because you can't count, or read, or write. Because in the Dark Ages, literacy isn't a given. It's a privilege. And chances are, you weren't granted it. You might be a knight, but you're not a scholar. Your education consisted of sword drills, mounted combat, and maybe how to sign your name, if your lord thought it was worth the effort. Letters, Latin, laws, those are for clerics and scribes, for people who don't bleed in the dirt. So when the order comes in writing, you wait for someone to read it to you. Slowly, carefully, and you nod like you understand, even when the words twist in your ears like riddles. You don't ask questions because questions are for the untrustworthy, for men who seem unsure. And a knight is never unsure, but that ignorance, it's dangerous. You follow commands you don't fully understand. You sign agreements you can't read. You swear loyalty to things you've only heard described. You obey because you must, but also because you don't know what disobedience might really cost. Meanwhile, you're judged. By priests who write sermons you can't interpret. By nobles who pen letters in languages you can't speak. By clerks who tally the taxes and lands you were awarded, and whose mistakes you can't correct because you can't see them. You sit in courts where scrolls are unrolled and discussed in front of you. You're mentioned, you're referenced. Decisions are made that affect your future, but the parchment may as well be a spellbook written by ghosts. You nod, again, you pretend, and you carry out the orders with the same stiff pride you've always worn. There are rumors, of course, of knights who can read, who carry books, who write their own letters. They're rare, and respected, or feared, or distrusted. Because a literate knight is a dangerous thing. He sees what others miss. He knows what he's being made to do. He starts asking why. But most of you live in the moment. You fight what's in front of you. You survive on instinct, routine, and loyalty. And when you hear tales being told about you, good or bad, you have to rely on others to tell you what's being said. Your story belongs to the people who write it, and you'll never know if they got it right. You may have a priest for your soul, a squire for your armor, and a lord for your loyalty, but the person who actually keeps you going, the blacksmith, he doesn't ask questions. He doesn't preach. He doesn't care what you did, where you fought, or who you accidentally insulted at court. He just fixes your mess, quietly, constantly. Your sword is bent. He straightens it. Your chainmail's torn. He patches it, ring by cursed ring. Your breastplate is caved in after a joust went sideways. He hammers it out, muttering to himself, never judging. He's not there to admire you. He's there to keep your gear from falling apart faster than you do. And while he works, you talk. Not much at first, maybe just a grumble about the weather. A curse about your squire forgetting to oil the armor. But then, as the iron clinks and sparks fly, it happens. You start to speak. Really speak. Because in that forge, where the heat drowns out your thoughts and the rhythm of the hammer fills the silence, something loosens in your chest. You tell him about the ambush, the friend who didn't make it, the duel you regret, the dream that wakes you up every night with your hand gripping a blade. And he listens, not with words, but with nods, with the steady strike of steel on steel, with the unspoken understanding of someone who's seen too much from the sidelines. He knows your armor better than you do. He knows how many dents it's taken, where the blade slipped through, what kind of blow made that deep crease in your helm. He knows because he repairs it after every battle, patching metal that tells a story you can't put into words. And maybe that's why you keep coming back. Even when your gear's not broken, even when there's nothing urgent, because it's the only place where you don't have to pretend, where your silence is normal, where your scars don't need explanation. You don't call him friend, that would be too much. But when he hands you back your sword, freshly polished, perfectly balanced, you nod with a kind of reverence usually reserved for relics. Because you know what it means. You're ready to fight again, not because you've healed, but because he put the pieces back together. The blacksmith doesn't lead you into battle. He doesn't sing your name. He doesn't wear a crest, but without him, your sword breaks, your armor cracks, and your mask of strength falls off completely. He is the forge. You are the iron. And together you survive a little longer. You've survived battles, sieges, starvation, betrayal, and plague. You've killed men. You've buried friends. You've spent your life forging your legacy with steel and sweat. And still, you get passed over for the bard. The bard, that velvet-wrapped, lute-strumming, wine-sipping poet who's never held a sword in his life. He sings songs about love and moonlight. You smell like horses and unwashed wool. He writes verses that make women swoon. You can barely sign your name without someone guiding your hand. And yet, he gets the glances, the smiles, the whispered invitations after the feast. You thought valor was attractive, that scars told stories, that honor made you interesting. But when you sit beside a lady at court, she nods politely, asks about the weather, and turns to the bard who just made a pun about flowers and kisses. You try to impress her with tales of the battlefield, but somehow, screaming, blood, and groin wounds don't set the romantic tone you hoped for. You don't speak well. You weren't trained to. Your life has been combat drills and loyalty oaths, not poetry readings. You walk like a man who's been thrown off a horse too many times. Your hands are rough. Your face is tired. and when you try to be gentle, your voice still sounds like you're issuing orders. The bard, meanwhile, winks and plays. He talks about love as if it's a choice, not a transaction. He wears perfume. His boots don't have mud on them. His fingernails are clean. Yours look like you just clawed your way out of a collapsed mine. And it stings. Not because you want the attention. Not even because you believe in love the way he sings about it. But because after everything you've done, everything you've endured, you thought someone might see the man behind the armor. Instead, they see the armor. And they move on. You start to resent his songs. The way he romanticizes war, painting you as some brave, tragic figure while sipping wine you can't afford. You sit in the back of the hall while he sings about knights dying nobly, and all you can think about is the stink of rotting flesh and the sound of your friend choking on blood. But you stay quiet. Because you know how this works. Bards get remembered. Knights get buried. And women, they get to choose. They choose the ones who speak sweetly, not the ones who survive bitterly. In the end, you retire alone. While he marries a noble's daughter and writes songs about your last stand. You lived the life. He wrote the legend. Guess which one people loved. You always thought there would be more. More songs, more remembrance. A legacy carved into stone, or at least into someone's memory. You imagined your name surviving past your last breath. Told by bards, honored by lords, whispered by squires in training who wanted to fight like you. But no, your name fades before your wounds do. You aren't the chosen one. You're not the hero of the realm. You're a knight. One of many. One of too many. You marched, you bled, you served, and you were never the highest rank, never the closest to the throne, never the one the poets followed into battle. Your victories were shared, so your glory was diluted, your mistakes, those were your own. If you fought well, your lord took the credit. If you fell behind, the whispers started. When a city fell, no one remembered who was first over the wall. But they definitely remembered who dropped the banner during the retreat. You might have saved lives, you might have held the line, you might have died with your hand clenched around a sword, and your body broken in service to a cause you never understood. But unless someone important saw it, it didn't happen. Not in the stories. Not in the records. Not in the ballads sung over wine by people who never lifted a weapon. Your sword will be passed down. Maybe, or melted down, or taken from your corpse and used by the same men who killed you. Your armor, sold, your horse, claimed, your name, written in a ledger once, then forgotten when the ink faded. No statue, no song, no mention in the noble genealogies. You don't get buried in a cathedral. You get buried in dirt, beside dozens of others who also thought they mattered. And when the stone marking your grave crumbles, there will be no one left who remembers what you fought for, who you were, why it mattered. Because in the end, you weren't the story. You were the body count. You didn't ride into legend. You made sure someone else could. You lived through the worst of it: mud, blood, rot, starvation, fear. And now, long after you're gone, something strange begins to happen. People start to remember you differently. The armor that nearly cooked you alive, now it gleams in paintings. The wars that shattered your bones and your mind. Now they're tales of bravery and noble sacrifice. The battles where you saw friends die, where you killed out of panic, not strategy, those have become heroic last stands. The screaming has been edited out, the stink erased, the terror smoothed over by time. You're no longer a man, you're a myth. Historians write of honor and duty. Bards romanticize your pain into melody. Lords claim your victories as part of their lineage. And the world, centuries later, imagines you as tall, bold, dashing, a chivalric icon charging into destiny with perfect posture and cleaner hair. They forget the toothaches, the lice, the frostbite, the diarrhea, the 1,000 tiny humiliations that made up your days. They don't sing about the moment your sword slipped from your grasp because your fingers were numb from fear. They don't write about how you cried when your horse died, not from sentimentality, but because you had no way home. They call it the age of chivalry, as if everyone was gallant and noble, as if every knight lived in a castle with banners flapping in the wind and a noble lady watching from the tower. But you remember sleeping in manure, choking on chainmail sweat, and negotiating with a bandit over whether your life was worth a half loaf of moldy bread. You were tired, you were hungry, you were human. But now, you're legend. And it's easier this way, easier for the future to look back and believe knights were clean and noble and brave all the time. Easier to sell stories, to carve statues, to build a national identity on men who were broken but remembered as heroes. You don't get a say in your story anymore. The ink is dry. The myth has replaced the man. The myth is prettier, stronger, marketable. But somewhere, beneath the steel and the gold leaf and the polished marble, you're still there. A shadow, squinting through the glamour, watching history repackage your suffering into spectacle. You don't mind, not really, because it means, at last, people finally see you, even if it's not the truth. So, now you know. You've walked through the mud, bled in the dust, vomited in your helmet, and cried into your chainmail. You've been starved, hunted, betrayed, forgotten, and turned into a bedtime story for children who will never understand what it really cost. This was the life of a knight. Not the fantasy, the reality. It wasn't about dragons or damsels. It wasn't about glory. It was about endurance. About surviving one miserable day at a time while your joints cracked, your sword dulled, and your friends died next to you without fanfare or farewell. You were a servant, a symbol, a weapon, a body in a suit of iron that never quite fit. And yet, there's something in you that still leans forward. Because despite all the rot and regret, there's a spark buried beneath the rust. Not because knighthood was noble, but because you endured, you stood, you kept going. When your armor hurt, when your horse was gone, when the banners were burning, and the songs hadn't yet been written. You carried weight, real weight, not just of metal, but of duty, of silence, of centuries. So, do you still want the armor? Do you still want to stand in that helmet with no vision, wield that sword that betrays your wrist, ride into wars you don't understand for lords who won't remember your name? If you do, then be ready, not for honor, for suffering. Because being a knight doesn't mean being a hero. It means never stopping, even when the world forgets why you started. And if you still want the armor after all that, then maybe, just maybe, you deserve it.